Story 1. I've been living in my house for over 10 years now. My next door neighbors were a nice old couple, and I had a wonderful relationship with them over the years. Nearly a year ago, my good neighbor suffered from a heart attack, and sadly, he couldn't make it. A few weeks later, his wife decided that it was too much for her to stay in the same house without her beloved husband. So she moved to a different city to be near her daughter, who insisted that she come live with her after her father passed. However, the thoughtful lady wanted to live in a separate place to avoid crowding her daughter's house and being a burden on her. Anyway, they put their house up for sale, and eventually, a couple of entitled individuals ended up buying it. They were in their early 50s, and the word rude doesn't even begin to describe how they treated every neighbor around them from the get-go. They demanded major changes to their neighbors' houses because they thought the houses looked bad whenever they looked at them. Clearly, the wife, Karen, was on the Homeowners Association board back in their previous community. So, yeah, you could guess where the demanding part was coming from. She was used to getting her way most of the time. One day, she came to my doorstep, rang my doorbell, and demanded that I invite her in so she could discuss a serious matter with me. I complied with her nonsense, not because I had to, but because that's how I was raised. It was all about good manners to me. I let her in, sat her down, and got her some fresh juice. She made a snarky comment about the juice, but I let it slide. After all, she was a guest in my house, so I tolerated her nonsense a bit more than usual. Then she started talking about how her son was planning on getting married in 6 months and was looking for a house to live in after tying the knot. More accurately, they were looking for a house for him since he couldn't afford anything himself. They wanted to buy him a house. Up until this point, I had no idea what I was supposed to do with all this pointless information. I mean, congratulations and all, but why are you telling me this? Do you want me to lend you some money, or what exactly do you want from me? I had no idea until she started spouting the most insane, entitled demands anyone has ever asked of me. I want to buy your house for my son. I didn't realize it at first. It went right over my head. I was like, okay, what house? As far as I know, I don't own any houses other than this one I'm living in. So, you must be mistaken about something. Whatever house you're interested in buying, it's not really mine. At the time, I didn't even think she would dare ask me or anyone else something like what you're all thinking right now. She then asked me, "Isn't this your house? You're the owner, right? You're not renting it." Well, yeah, this house is mine. But what does that have anything to do with what you're asking me about? Everything. It has everything to do with what I'm talking about because the house I want you to sell me is this house. I didn't believe what I just heard for a second. I had to ask her a couple more times just to make sure she meant this house I've been living in for 10 years. When it dawned on me, I couldn't help but ask her, "Okay, so after I sell it to you, where am I supposed to go?" Her answer was, "That isn't really my problem, is it? I mean, you could go wherever you want. I don't know, try another state or something. That's your choice. I don't want to force anything on you." I just couldn't help it. I jumped out of my seat instinctively and screamed, "Get out!" She seemed genuinely confused, as if she didn't know what she just said. She asked me, "What? What's the meaning of this?" I kept shouting. "Get out of my house right now. Are you out of your mind?" She blurted some nonsense on her way out, but eventually went back to her house. She stopped in front of mine and started calling me names, and she didn't move until I threatened to call the cops and tell them she was harassing me. After this encounter, she started making my life a living nightmare. She tried annoying me in hopes of driving me away from my own home. She even had her son send thugs to my doorstep and office to intimidate me into selling my house to them. One day, I returned to my house and found my teenage kids freaking out and my daughter shaking and crying in the front yard. When I asked them what was wrong, they said there was a snake in the house. What? A snake? In my house? Since when do we get snakes in this area? It's not even possible to see things like that where I live. I called 911 and animal control, and they arrived within 15 minutes after asking us to stay outside. They went in and started searching for it. After 35 minutes, they managed to catch the snake, but stayed for another 30 minutes to search for more since we had no idea how many there were. While all this happened, most of the nearby neighbors stood by us outside our house to check what was going on, and some even tried to calm down my kids. They were very supportive. All except our entitled neighbors. They never got out of their house. Clearly, a disaster was happening to their next-door neighbor, but none of them bothered to check what was going on. I knew they were inside because I noticed them looking from behind the window curtains while being weirdly calm about the whole situation. When I caught myself thinking they might be responsible for the snake showing up in my house, I felt guilty. I shouldn't be thinking horribly of someone just because I had a bad encounter with them before. I know what you're thinking, but believe me, I don't know how I got that far in life with this naive mindset either. But I promise it's not like that anymore, at least not after what happened with these jerks. It took us all some time to start living comfortably in our house after this incident. We were frightened for weeks, paranoid, and even imagining shadows in our peripheral vision were crawling on the floor or onto our beds. It was a traumatic experience to some degree, but we're good now. A couple of weeks went by, and I woke up at night to some extremely loud screaming coming from around my house. I jumped out of bed, checked on my kids, then called the cops even before knowing what was going on. I told them I was hearing horrific screaming coming from around my house, gave them the address, and bolted out the door. At first, I didn't see anything up front, but when I followed the sound, it took me to the back of my house, as I suspected. And there she was. Karen was laying flat on her back, screeching like a banshee, and on top of her were two snakes crawling all over her body. I was overwhelmed by what I was seeing and had too many questions flying through my head at once. But her screaming brought my attention back to her and forced me to focus on getting her out of this situation. I tried to find a long stick or something to get those snakes off her. I kept trying to push them away and even yelled at her to get up and get away from them. But she kept crying that she had been bitten and was paralyzed and couldn't move. It didn't take long for the cops to show up. They tried to help her until the emergency medical technicians and animal control arrived. Eventually, the whole situation was contained. The snakes were captured, and she was taken to the hospital, all while screaming about how she was going to get me arrested and evicted from my own house for putting her life in danger by raising snakes all around my house. What she didn't know at the time was that after the first incident with a snake being found in my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was not a coincidence or just bad luck. Just some random snake decided to wander into a populated neighborhood away from any kind of forest nearby and wanted to grab a cup of coffee in this one house of ours. No, I didn't know how to buy that. Yeah, I was a bit naive, but I just couldn't shake off that feeling. So, I went and installed a couple of cameras around the house. I thought that this solution was satisfying for me at the moment. I'm not directly accusing anyone of bringing a snake to my doorstep, but at the same time, I'm taking my precautions and not fully ignoring my doubts and the alarms going off in my head. But classic me completely forgot about my cameras. I didn't check the tapes until my son brought it to my attention the next day. Hey, we have cameras. We could check what went down last night using them, right? Oh, wow, cameras. Yeah, let's do that. We were shocked by what we saw on that tape. Karen was sneaking into our backyard with a dirty bag in her hand. She was carrying it carefully and was very keen on not getting it near her. She then came near my basement's wooden back door, which was not in its best shape, and started to carefully open the bag bit by bit. It was as if she was trying to pour what was in the bag into a small hole I had on one of the wooden doors. And of course, as you may think by now, she brought the two snakes in this bag she was carrying, and she was clearly trying to sneak them into my house again. But to her surprise, one of the snakes decided to crawl the other way towards her once it got out. That was obviously enough to spook her. She panicked and tried to backpedal, but quickly fell on her behind. And that's when the other snake crawled out of the bag still in her hand and decided to have a field trip on her body. It seemed that she was indeed bitten a few times after she freaked out the snakes with her screaming. But I later learned that both of them weren't really that dangerous and that she was fine. What paralyzed her that day was probably the fear, not the venom. After I was done watching this, let's just say it's an understatement if I say that my blood was boiling. I took some time to calm down, and after that, I got my son to get a copy of the tape. I took it to the station right away to file a report against her, and, press charges, of course. I won't bore you with what happened next because it took some time and a lot of legal details that someone like myself hardly understands. But after taking this whole thing to court, she was found guilty. Eventually, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison, among other things. Plus, we're now filing a lawsuit to get compensated for the emotional damage we had to endure. Her husband ended up selling their house after that to fund the court fees and for potentially paying me for the recent lawsuit we filed. It's impossible for them to keep living in this neighborhood after everyone knew what they did to us. Also, from what I've heard, Their son's fiancée left him after knowing what his crazy mother did to her neighbors. Overall, that was a really horrible experience I had to go through with my family. But at least there's a bright side to it. I locked up a Karen. I'm going to get loads of money from her, and I have an interesting story for you guys to listen to. Story 2? Hello, first-time poster, long-time lurker. I decided to post this story as it was my very first encounter with an entitled person. I've had small encounters with entitled people in the past, especially when I used to work in retail. But this one definitely takes the cake. Background: our family had just gotten a dog last year in April named Charlie. He's a sweet, fluffy little boy who loves attention, especially from strangers, the type to approach and ask for belly rubs. Prior to having Charlie, our family wasn't involved in the community, just a few greetings to neighbors here and there, but that's about it. However, ever since Charlie came into our lives, he has made quite a few friends in our neighborhood, making him a very popular dog. Anyway, the first incident happened with my sister and Charlie walking. Sister and Charlie were walking in a grassy area, a public walkway in between people's backyards. Lots of people go there to walk their dogs. Sometimes you see dogs outside their backyards by themselves, but there are big fences blocking them from escaping or possibly attacking another dog without an owner restraining them. This area is not an off-leash area, so of course, Charlie is in his harness. Obviously, this doesn't apply to the dogs in their own backyard. They can roam as they please. Sister loves taking Charlie there because he loves to say hi to the other dogs, and although they can't really play, he just enjoys seeing other dogs. As they went down the path, a golden retriever started barking at Charlie. No big deal, they are dogs, and sometimes dogs just don't like other dogs. Whatever, the golden retriever was inside and barking from the window anyway. I wasn't with Sister, so this conversation is paraphrased. Enter the entitled person. Your dog is aggressive. You need to stop bringing him here. Charlie is not even barking back, and regardless, the dog is inside and is of no reason to be of concern. You always bring him here, and you do this on purpose. I have cameras everywhere, and I caught you. Just to note, the dog wasn't even the entitled person's dog. It was the neighbor's. Go post it on YouTube then. You should just mind your own business. I will, and you are so fat also. Okay, nice tan by the way. Fast forward to my encounter. Sister, of course, warned me about this entitled person. Me and her didn't think much of it. Maybe just someone having a bad day. I started walking Charlie to the same area. This walkway is only one way, so you go up the same way and go back down the same way. As I was walking up, I saw a woman and her dog inside their backyard. The woman was on her phone. At this point, I didn't know this was the entitled person, just thought it was some random lady. Her dog was inside her backyard, and of course, Charlie got excited. He exchanged a couple of looks with the dog and ran up and down the fence. The dog wasn't really interested. He was an older, bigger dog, just quiet and doing his own thing. We continued our walk, and as we went back down, the entitled person appeared again. Keep in mind, I was the only one walking their dog at this time, and I was also on the phone. As me and Charlie walked down, right when we got to her backyard, she slammed open her fence, yanked her dog out, and pushed the dog to get right close to Charlie. In my head, it looked like she wanted our dogs to play because she timed it and executed it like that. So I didn't immediately notice what was going on until I noticed she was filming and started saying that my dog was attacking her dog. I finally realized it was the entitled person. The following conversation ensued. I am filming your dog attacking my dog, she said. I was confused. What are you talking about? The two dogs were just looking at each other, not even a single bark or growl between them, just being polite. Get your aggressive dog away from my dog. Are you serious? Neither of them are doing anything to each other. You are just trying to create something. I am filming. Okay, film. You can film the dogs not doing anything. Your dog is attacking my dog. You literally filmed yourself taking your dog out of your backyard to meet the dog you say is attacking your dog. Seriously, does that even make sense to you? Who in their right mind would do that if that were actually true? I am still filming. Okay, bye. I called Sister to explain what happened and also told our parents. To avoid further encounters with the entitled person, we stopped walking Charlie there. Fast forward a couple of weeks, Sister got a call from the police asking about our side of the story. Long story short, Sister explained everything to the police, both incidents with the entitled person. After the explanation, the police immediately closed the case and even said we had a sweet dog and that we could walk Charlie there because it is a public walkway. The entitled person thought she actually had something on the video. It angers me how far she went, even when we made the effort to avoid and not confront her. We still don't walk Charlie there even if the police said it's okay. We don't want to risk our beloved Charlie with that lady around. But it felt satisfying that what she wanted didn't happen and she was defeated. Thanks for listening.